Hey, Transformer Innovator, Learning Experience Designer, and Learner-Centered Practitioner. Welcome back to 12 Days of PBL. This is day number 4, day number 3, affectionately named after the 12 days before Christmas. Now, day 1, we chatted about what makes high-quality project-based learning, and we used a case study to highlight those things. Day 2, we looked at how do we build community partnerships in a way that's going to enhance our experiences. Day 3, let's get to the elephant in the room that everybody has on their mind. How do we infuse our mandated curriculum, standards, and skills into project-based experiences? This is the number one barrier, number one excuse I hear from people as to why they're not implementing project-based experiences. They say, look, I've got this huge curriculum to cover, and I understand it feels like it's very rigid and that you can't do project-based learning with it. But my hope is to show you that, yes, you can. It just takes a little bit tweak in your thinking. Okay, so let's look at this big question again. How do I infuse my curriculum standards and skills into PBL? Now, let's look at what we traditionally do. Traditionally, what we're going to do is when we organize either our units or what we're studying, either they're laid out into the sections of a textbook, or we lay it out toward the units of novel studies, different writing pieces that students are going to do. And usually what we'll do is we'll just have these standards. They exist kind of in isolation. We don't really mix those kind of standards together in a way that feels like cohesive. They're kind of disjointed. The difference between that and a project-based experience is you're not necessarily going to start with taking all these standards and saying, okay, how can we jam these standards together? You're going to start as from a real provocation and a real outcome that students are going to produce. And you're going to organize your standards around that project-based experience. I'm not talking about a project that you're going to do in the last 2 or 3 days. I'm talking about the project being the main course that's going to drive the learning. That's the difference here, is that the project doesn't come at the end. The project is what drives the learning of these standards. Okay, but the standards have a real context. And again, as always, I'm going to introduce you to a case study that's going to help you see how to do that. Now, we're going to take something in a subject like English. Okay, typically what people are going to do with English, if you're teaching high school English, which is what this teacher was doing, is you're going to have novel studies, you're going to have different types of writing that students are going to do, and you're going to kind of just tick off the standards to make sure that they get that, right? They know how to write. They know how to organize their writing. They know how to read and analyze literature. All very important skills, by the way, but kind of taught in isolation in a school setting. But when we put them in a real setting, all we're going to do is make one simple shift. We're going to organize those again around a project-based experience. So here's the case study. There's a novel study that students had to do in high school English. It was centered around The Great Gatsby. You've probably seen the film. So even if you're not American, you're probably familiar with the film. It's a novel. The students have to read it, have to analyze it. And guess what they do at the end? What almost always happens in a traditional English class. They'll write a book report. They'll write an essay. And where does that essay usually go? It goes in a shelf. It gets a grade. It gets a mark, and then bye-bye. With a project, they're going to do something real. And here's the difference. Here's the shift, is what they are producing is going to rely on those rigorous standards, and it's going to rely on the book study. So take something like The Great Gatsby. Rather than doing a book study at the end, the kids are looking at, well, what's the bigger theme here? The bigger theme is the American dream, and the American dream in the 1920s. We live in 2022. What does the American dream look like now? Bam, that becomes the central focus for how we're using the novel. The kids are then creating a podcast, as you see here. They're creating a podcast and a website that's going to feature stories from their community around the American dream. And is the American dream still alive? How might we redefine it? Each podcast episode is going to share and feature a different story from the community. And when it comes all together, it's going to be this beautiful final product. Now, as you see here, this is how we're getting through the project, right? We're learning these standards as students are putting together these artifacts. As they're putting together the scripts for the podcast, they're learning a little bit about writing and interviewing skills. You know, as they're producing the podcast and then interviewing the guests, they're learning a little bit more about speaking skills, how to present, As they're putting the podcast together and editing and recording, they're learning a little bit about media and how digital media works, how to market as well, so to get their podcast out to a greater audience. So, and finally, I put this last one here. The novel is going to be the main focus, The Great Gatsby. So they're still going deep into the content and the literature and the context of the story itself, but it's actually serving more as an anchor for this real project that they're doing. So that is how you integrate the curriculum. And what's going to happen is you're going to integrate probably more than you could if you just covered these things in isolation. Yes, it's going to take longer, but again, you're going to be able to infuse more of your curriculum. More importantly, kids are going to pick up these skills, and these skills that these students picked up by doing this podcast, it transformed them. They came to life. They're engaged. They learned how to collaborate with others. They learned how to reach out to different stakeholders in the community, and they built this confidence. That's going to transfer to more than just your subject. That's going to transfer to real world and life for these youth. So that's it. How we answered, how do we infuse curriculum and standards and skills into a project-based experience? If you have experience doing this, please in the comment section, share your story. We want to hear it. If you have not, share after hearing this video how you might infuse curriculum and standards into a project-based experience that you had in mind. And I'll be sure to give you some feedback. Finally, last but not least, right below here, it says transformschool.com / 12 days of PBL. This is where you can get all of those videos delivered straight to your inbox, just in case you missed the other days. I will see you for day 4, where we look at scheduling and scaffolding. And I'm going to invite a special guest to join me who's doing this very well. And I'll see you tomorrow.